Hello, everyone. We are currently running into some lighting issues here in the studio, but we're still going to bring you a new edition of Hall Talk. It's been a 2-week hiatus, and there's been a lot to talk about because it seems like Seton Hall Athletics is raising the temperature along with the weather outside. The transfer portal has been heating up across college basketball, and Seton Hall is feeling the impact of it. Last week, the Pirate phenom Lauren Park Lane announced she'll be playing her 5th year somewhere else. Then later this week, Femi Odukale entered the transfer portal as well. Moving to some current action, how about the Seton Hall softball team? Winners of 3 straight and 9 of their last 10. They're sitting at second in the Big East Conference at 9-3 and 26-12 overall. Meanwhile, baseball has steady tried to find their footing. They were able to take their first Big East series, defeating Georgetown 2-1 and splitting against Garden State opponents, losing one and winning their most recent game against NJIT. With all that being said, what holes will each basketball team have to fill with their guards leaving? What is the ceiling for this historic softball team? And who are the pieces that can help this baseball team stay afloat atop the half of the conference standings? This is going to be a great conversation, so stay tuned. My name is Wilnir Louis, and this is Hall Talk. Once again, I'm Wilnir Louis, joined alongside Joe Morales. And Joe, first and foremost, like I mentioned, the weather outside is absolutely tremendous. Aren't you enjoying the weather that we're having?
Man, I was up early this morning just to be here, but the weather outside at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is 70 degrees. I mean, it's about time the weather finally started heating up. I'm pumped to be here also, Wilnir.
It's going to be a great time talking about some Seton Hall sports. So let's start off with a little bit of basketball. Again, the transfer portal, we've seen a record number of players enter the transfer portal across college basketball, across the NCAA, and it's really starting to feel it here on Seton Hall's campus. Lauren Park Lane earlier on in this month announced that she'll be leaving, along with Kayla Harris, who mentioned earlier this week that she'll be leaving on the women's side. So, Joe, just talk about a little bit just the impact of losing those two players, more notably Lauren Park Lane, who's on the record books for almost everything Seton Hall related.
I mean, you name it, Lauren Park Lane has achieved it here at Seton Hall. She's one of the all-time scorers here at Seton Hall. She finished just short of 1,900 points for her entire career at Seton Hall. And I mean, like I said, you name it, she's done it. But she's also led a team to the WNIT finals. You know, she led another team this year back to the WNIT as well. So just Lauren Park Lane, we talked about before we came on here, just one of the better players to ever put on the uniform and play at Walsh Gym. So they're going to miss her absolutely. But also, they're losing a few other players too. A few players, like we said, graduate students before we came on, and for whatever reason it is, they're losing a lot of players. So Wilnir, in the transfer portal, they're going to have to find key players, and I trust Tony Bozzella to do that. I mean, if there's one player that can turn around the women's basketball program and bring it back to the heights we saw it over the last 2 years, it's Tony Bozzella, and I really do trust him.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the transfer that Tony Bozzella was able to bring in the past couple of years, Andre Espinoza-Hunter, Sydney Cooks, 2 notable transfers that Seton Hall has been able to get. But, we talk about Lauren Park Lane, and, she was absolutely dominant in her 4 years here at Seton Hall, coming in 2019, 2020. And even in that year, she was the only player as a freshman to play all 31 games for Seton Hall and was dominant even from the start up until when Seton Hall played in the Big East semifinals of the tournament. Like you mentioned, second in Seton Hall's history in terms of scoring as a career, first in assists, back-to-back unanimous All Big East first team. Like you name it, she's done it. Single game records in terms of scoring, in terms of assists. Like she has embodied what it means to be a Pirate basketball player, both on the men's and women's side. You think of Seton Hall basketball, you think of Lauren Park Lane. And it is upsetting to see her go, but, you got to understand, sometimes, whether it's academics, whether it's, just wanting to have a different spotlight for that final year, Seton Hall isn't maybe the big marquee school that you would think of, maybe like Auburn, of course, South Carolina, of course, UConn, other schools like that, Iowa on the women's side, but for Lauren Park Lane, whoever she's going to transfer to, she's going to make a big impact. And then again, Kayla Harris, not as big of an impact loss, but she is still a very vocal leader when it comes to the locker room. She was able to get a couple good minutes, was plagued with a good amount of injuries this past year, but nonetheless, still a loss that you're going to have to deal with on the women's side. Now, meanwhile, on the men's side, again, transfers are still piling up for Seton Hall men's basketball as well, as Femi Odukale entered his name into the transfer portal, and it seemed like that one just came out of whack. Of course, we saw Trey Jackson. We saw Tyrese Samuel enter their name in the transfer portal almost a day or two after the season was over. But Femi Odukale took a little more time, but evidently entered his name in the transfer portal. Does that come to a surprise to you, Joe?
It does, but it also doesn't, because let's be honest. It was an odd season for the Seton Hall men's basketball team. With Shaheen Holloway coming in, a lot of turnover. You don't really know what to expect. And I remember sitting in the press conference at the end of the season, one of the last home games that the Pirates had, and Shaheen Holloway was very honest to the media. He was saying that if players don't buy into his system, he's going to find guys that do it. I'm not saying that these guys, didn't buy into the system, but Shaheen Holloway is going to do everything he can to bring in the right players that he feel fits his program. And, Femi Odukale, you look back at the year he had, and, I can't help but think about the game against Providence where he put up 19 and that awesome win on the road and, gave us Pirate fans a little hope going into the Big East tournament. But, it's going to be a big loss. Am I shocked about it? Not really. Like I said, Shaheen Holloway was really looking for those guys that fit his system. And Femi was a very good player, too. So he's also going to have to find guys to get in here and fill these spots. Because next year, at this moment, they don't really have they don't have the roster filled to begin with. But they need guys who can shoot. They need a point guard for that matter. And I like the transfer they brought in from Memphis. I don't know if we're going to talk about him, but he was brilliant. But Femi's going to be a huge loss. And the losses they've already endured, they're going to have to find very, very good players to replace him.
Yeah, Femi Odukale, just, as you mentioned, losing him, it a little bit comes to a surprise to me. During the back half of the season, like you mentioned, that Providence game, he was really good. 19 points in that Providence game. Even the game before against Villanova had a double-double with 14 points, 10 rebounds. Now it came in Kadari's absence, with Kadari missing the back half of the season. Not the back half, but the last couple of games of the season due to an injury. So maybe it could be a little bit of a fit in that sense, where it's like, Kadari Richmond's coming back. He's going to most likely be the star of the show when it comes to Seton Hall men's basketball. Femi Odukale maybe doesn't want to play second fiddle to a guard that's of the similar play style of him. It is interesting to me that you come transferring from Pitt, come to Seton Hall, and then you transfer once again, and the transfer rules are going to be changing a little bit for the NCAA. But nonetheless, it was great to see him play for Seton Hall, being able to play 31 games and have 52 steals on the year. But like you mentioned, that first year for Shaheen Holloway was a little bit of a get-right year, and now he's going to be able to get his players that he really wants to come in, get to the recruiting, whether it's transfer portal, whether it's incoming freshmen, and overall, hopefully next year is a better year where Seton Hall can make their name back into the NCAA tournament. But alas, that's all that we have for men's basketball and basketball as an entirety, because we have to get into some current action. We have to get into some real good play on the diamond with the Seton Hall softball team. They have been scorching hot. This has been their best start of the season. That has been their best stretch of the season since the Y2K hysteria, Joe. Since 1999, this Seton Hall team has been pretty good since 1999, but they haven't had a stretch like this where they're 18-3 over the last 21 games. They have been dominant when it's come to batting averages, when it comes to ERA, and this is a team that was projected not to be that great in the Big East Conference, but now they're standing at second. They have a great overall record. Joe, what is the ceiling for this softball team?
I think it's Big East championship. That's their ceiling, because they haven't had one since 2005. And you look up and down the Seton Hall softball roster. Starting with Abby Wingo, Big East Player of the Week, and hit the lights out of the ball. She's hitting 400 this week. But you have to look inside the circle for Seton Hall. Shelby Smith and Kelsey Carr. Not only do they hit, they can also pitch too, and it's really fantastic because when you can have these dual weapons, as I call them, players that can hit and pitch. It's awesome, and it's so helpful to the team. And they lead the Big East in ERA. They are shutting down opponents, Wilnir. And when you have two dominant aces like the Seton Hall Pirates do, not a lot of teams can beat them. We've seen it in Big East play. They swept St. John's. I believe they're 9-3 in conference play. They've been brilliant, and there's really no end in sight. I think that the ceiling for the Seton Hall Pirate team, first of all, is a Big East tournament appearance, but also I think they could win a Big East championship. They have the talent on the roster to do it.
Like you mentioned, the Big East tournament, that last time Seton Hall was able to do that was 2015, so it's been a couple of years from that. Last time they made the NCAA tournament was 2005. So it's been, a lot of years since the Seton Hall softball team has really been on the national stage, and we're starting to see them a little bit on the national stage now. I saw that, on Twitter, one of the most exciting games over the past couple of weeks was that comeback that Seton Hall had against Rider, where they were down 10-0 on the brink of getting mercied, and then they were able to rally back, walk off, and win that one 11-10. So this is a softball team that is really, really good, and they have really shown not only, as you mentioned, their batting averages, their ERAs, doing it defensively, doing it offensively, and they've been showing that they're resilient as well. When their back's against the wall, they're not, shying away from the lights. They seem like they're doing a lot better when the lights are on them. So this is a team that really could be pretty good. Joe, I think for me, what's going to be very crucial for this softball team is going to be their last two home games down the stretch now, or home series down the stretch. Now, of course, there's a lot more series and a lot more games that are going to have to play for the softball team. But those last two home series against Villanova and against Butler, I think is going to be crucial in terms of seeing where this softball team can go and if they could finish in that top half of the standings to make it to the Big East tournament.
No, absolutely. And like you said, they're looking for their first Big East tournament appearance since 2015. So getting there would be huge. And these last few series are going to be very important because these are some very, very good teams when it comes to the Big East. And, you become a very good team when you can play with your conference. So if Seton Hall can play with these teams, they can steal a couple games, which I think they can, then this team can make a run to the Big East Championship. I think they're very capable of winning it as well. So it's going to come down to these last few series, like you said, but I'm very excited to see what they do because I think they can play very, very well as long as they continue their very, very good pitching and keep swinging the bats as well as they are.
Again, Villanova 9-3 in conference play, Butler 9-3 in conference play as well. So that's the reason why it makes it that much critical for Seton Hall to have to play well in those series because it's likely that it's going to be the way that the standings are right now. UConn, Seton Hall, Villanova, and Butler, the four teams that will make it to the Big East tournament for the softball side. Now let's transition over to the baseball side where they are standing right now 16-15 overall. They were able to get their first Big East series earlier on in the week against Georgetown where they were able to take them 2-1. And this is a team that seems like, Joe, that they're pretty good at times. Again, 16 wins, but in those 15 losses, some games have been not that much good, not great for baseball as well, but they were able to show life against NJIT their last time out at the time of recording. So just, Joe, it seems like this team can be a little bit inconsistent at times. Just how do they find a way to stay consistent and stay in that top half of the standings?
Well, the inconsistency really comes with the pitching, and it's been a struggle this year, especially when you look at the top of the rotation. Brennan O'Neill is your workhorse. He's going to be your best pitcher, but he struggled as of late. And Coach Rob Shepard, has begun to use him out of the bullpen and try and get him acclimated with trying to get back on track as well. But I will say, Wilnir, the last few games they've been very, very well when it comes to pitching, especially last game against NJIT. They used a lot of bullpen guys. Very impressed with the freshman Michael Gillen from Bergen Catholic. Ryan Wright can throw very, very hard and misses a lot of bats. And Nick Piero, another one of the good relievers, and of course the Rutgers transfer, Cole Hanser, has been one of the better pitchers in the country earlier in the year. So the pitching is very inconsistent when it comes to the rotation, but behind them in the bullpen, very, very good. So if they can figure out a few things, they can tweak a few things at the top of their rotation, they'll be fine all the way because they can hit. They can hit with some of the best in the conference. Max Vieira is hitting up near 350. Pat D'Amico is one of the best power hitters in the conference, and Will Gill at the top of the lineup is the best table setter in the Big East. So they can hit with the best. If they can pitch, they can make a run in the Big East tournament.
As you mentioned, that NJIT game for Seton Hall, considered a staff game for the baseball team where, as you mentioned, they can see what their relievers, what their pitchers are looking like. No pitcher, I believe, won more than 2 innings. So, again, just trying to see what kind of arms that they have out there when they get more into the nitty-gritty of Big East play. This is a team, the baseball team, that have shown that they can be pretty good when it comes to hitting and when it comes to getting those runs across. I mean, 5 of the last 10 games, Joe, they've produced more than 8 runs. So you look at that and it's like, well, they could produce those runs. You look at their last 2 wins that they were able to get, they shut those teams out. So you mentioned the defense where, they're able to shut out teams. You mentioned the offense where they're able to get those runs. It's just now, can they be able to string it together at a consistent basis for them to stay atop of the Big East standings, where right now they're standing at when it comes to 2-1 in this conference standings, Joe?
Right, and if they can figure out their pitching, and there's a lot of baseball they played. I mean, Big East is just underway, and like what you said, Wilnir, they took 2 out of 3 from Georgetown. They split a doubleheader on Saturday against them and then won the game on Friday. So still a lot of baseball they played, and they've had a few of these get-right games out of conference against the local teams, and they've played pretty well. The pitching's been great there. But going into Big East play, if they can get their pitching going, they will make a run in the tournament, Wilnir.
Well, let's hope that they actually are going to get right with those games. Again, baseball 16-15 overall, 2-1 in conference standings, going to get into the heart of Big East play. But with all that being said, Joe, that will do it for this episode of Hall Talk. For Joe Morales and everybody behind the scenes to make this Hall Talk possible, I've been Wilnir Louis saying so long, and make sure you check all of our other content on our Pirate Television YouTube page.